intelligence and open source assessments that the Russian influence campaign was approved by President Putin. Quote, Moscow did seek to denigrate Secretary Clinton. So this is a resounding statement from the Intelligence Committee in the Senate saying when that report came out from the NSA and the FBI and the CIA in January 2017, as the Obama administration was leaving and the Trump administration was about to be sworn in, that intelligence community assessment that said Russia had meddled in the election to try to throw the election to Trump. Now the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, the bipartisan Intelligence Committee, both Republicans and Democrats are saying, yeah, that intelligence community report, that was sound. And over time, it's only been more proven out by what we have learned since. Now, in contrast, this past week, President Trump has literally quoted Vladimir Putin and the Russian government in their denials that they ever meddled in the 2016 election. The intelligence community assessment from January of last year says, oh, yes, they did. And now this bipartisan note to Senate report on that intelligence finding says that it's bulletproof. Quote, the committee believes the conclusions of the intelligence community assessment are sound, and notes that collection and analysis subsequent to the assessment's publication continue to reinforce its assessments. Right? So right, this seems important, particularly given the fact that the sitting president of the United States keeps denying that Russia ever did this. This is an important report. Why did the Intelligence Committee sneak this out the door with no notice, no announcement on the night before the 4th of July? They've released this big, unequivocal report. It took them months to do it. It directly contradicts the current assertions of the President of the United States. It directly contradicts the President's defenders in the House of Representatives, who have said, oh, yeah, the intelligence community, they don't know what they're talking about. Russia didn't do nothing as far as we can tell, right? This is a big deal from the Senate Intelligence Committee. This is controversial. This is big news. But they have timed its release and not announced its release in a way that is designed to ensure as little news coverage of this as possible. See, this is why it's good you're here. This is why it's always good to watch the news on Friday nights and the night before a holiday. Anytime when people are apparently counting on you not to be watching the news, that's what it pays to be here. And that brings us to this. At the same moment, the U.S. Senate was releasing this report today, affirming and doubling down on the intelligence community's conclusions about Russia interfering in our last election in an unprecedented way. At that same moment, look, all these Republican senators were in Russia today, talking to the Russian government about how excited they are to let bygones be bygones, so we can all start working together again, since we're all such good friends and we're all pulling in the same direction anyway.
We know that there's going to be a big meeting. We hope it's going to be very big between the president and yours in Helsinki in a few weeks.
Alabama Senator Richard Shelby telling the Russian government today that he hopes the meeting between Trump and Putin is, quote, going to be very big. We know there's going to be a big meeting. We hope it's going to be very big between our president and yours in Helsinki in a few weeks. We hope it's going to be very big. What do you mean by big? Why are you hoping for bigness? What does that even mean? You're meeting with the Russian government. Did you plan in advance what you were going to say? We're hoping it's going to be a very big meeting. I think it's just going to be those two guys. What do you mean big? But watch where Senator Shelby really puts the screws to the Russians here.
Minister John Hoeven, Senator Ron Johnson, Wisconsin.
So we're hoping that coming out of the Putin-Trump meeting in Helsinki will be the beginning, maybe, of a new day. We will have to wait and see and go from there. But we recognize that the world's better off, I believe, if Russia and the U.S. have fewer tensions than our competitors, but we don't necessarily need to be adversaries.
Go get them, Senator. Did you wait till you saw the whites of their eyes? As the meeting went on today between all these Republican senators and officials from the Russian government, the Washington Post had a reporter there who says that Senator Shelby told the Speaker of the Duma, so the Speaker of the Russian Parliament, Senator Shelby told him, quote, "I'm not here to accuse Russia of this or that or so forth." Quote, "I'm saying we should all strive for a better relationship." That is not what the Russians have been striving for, big guy. The list of senators on this trip includes Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, Senator John Hoeven of North Dakota, Senator John Thune of South Dakota, Senator Steve Daines of Montana, and Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. Republican member of the House Kay Granger was also a member of the delegation. You'll notice that those are all Republicans on this trip. More on that in a little bit. Among the Russians they all met with was Sergei Kislyak. Remember him? Sergei Kislyak was the Russian ambassador to the United States during the Russian attack on our election. He's the guy who played such a key role in that intelligence operation, those active measures. He's now back in Moscow, received tons of awards as soon as he got back. He's now an elected official, and so, yeah, why not hang out with him if you're a visiting American? Sergei Kislyak told the Post today, quote, "The main thing about all of this is that our guests travel here in order to talk. This is probably good confirmation of a readiness to start a dialogue." To be clear, he presumably means the kind of dialogue for which you don't need a secret back channel phone line, secure phone line at the Russian embassy to talk to Jared Kushner, right? That was a different kind of dialogue he was working on before in his other job. The head of this inexplicable Republican-only congressional delegation to Russia, ahead of this inexplicable Russian congressional delegation to Russia today, Bloomberg News reported in this sort of adorable headline that the Republicans traveling to Russia, quote, "hope to tell Putin election meddling has to stop." And that's before they went. They hoped to tell Putin that. Once they arrived in Russia, though, the Russian government told them, no, sorry, Putin isn't going to have time to meet with them. That was nice. But apparently the whole issue of election meddling didn't come up. Another member of the Russian parliament told the Washington Post that whatever the Americans told the U.S. press they hoped to do before they got to Russia, once they arrived, it didn't quite go that way. Quote, Duma member Vyacheslav Vikhanov said that he had met with many American lawmakers in years past, but this meeting, quote, was one of the easiest ones in my life. This member of the Russian parliament told the Washington Post that the question of Russia interfering in U.S. elections was resolved quickly because, quote, the question was raised in a general form. He said, one should not interfere in elections. Well, we did not interfere. So the election meddling conversation was an easy one. One should not interfere. Well, we don't. Another Russian lawmaker bragged to an NPR correspondent in Moscow that the visiting Republicans not only didn't pressure the Russian government about them monkey-wrenching our election, they also didn't really pressure them about anything else either. Quote, Russian Senator Andrei Klimov tells me U.S. lawmakers did not bring up Crimea during the Moscow meeting. Quote, I did not hear the word Crimea once in 2 hours. This is kind of a weird thing, right? I mean, these pictures sort of feel strange for a reason. This actually feels like maybe it might be a landmark moment in strangeness. After Russia hit our election in 2016, that gave us two big worries as a country, right? One is what that means in terms of our current president, who they tried to help elect. But there's also the prospect now, the expectation, that Russia might keep doing it. Right? That Russia will keep monkey-wrenching our elections from here on out. They'll keep monkey-wrenching our elections and our politics to benefit the Kremlin and to hurt us as a country. Those are the two concerns. What does this say about Trump? Is he compromised by Russia? Why were they interfering to help him? And does he now owe them in some way, or do they have something over him that led to that campaign of active measures? Concerns about Trump, right? but also concerns about whether Russia would keep doing this in future elections. Well, now concern A and concern B are coming together because we're heading toward the 2018 elections, just a few months out. Trump administration officials say they have received no instructions for protecting the nation against a rerun of the 2016 Russian attack, but this time on the midterms. The president himself is not only not warning the Russians that they should back off and not mess with this election, he's now publicly quoting their denials that they ever interfered in the first place in 2016. He apparently believes them. Now Trump, in the lead up to the 2018 elections, he's embarked on this remarkable and seemingly rushed run of giving Russia stuff it wants. All right, we've had this long string of stuff that he has done all in a row, announcing that Russia should be allowed to rejoin the G7, which it was kicked out of after it invaded Crimea. He's now saying that maybe the U.S. would formally recognize that Crimea now belongs to Russia since they took it. The president unilaterally offering to cancel joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea. It's not necessarily something that sounds like it directly applies to Russia, but it is something which Vladimir Putin suggested to President Trump in a one-on-one phone call last year. He asked him to do it. We now know that President Trump didn't consult with the U.S. military on that policy change or on making the announcement about it. He just did it after Trump was asked by Putin to do so. Since then, we've learned that President Trump has also offered France financial incentives if they too would leave the European Union just like the UK did. So it'd be like a Frexit on top of a Brexit. Trump says he's willing to pay France to do that. We learned today that the president sent letters to every member of NATO criticizing all of them, implicitly threatening that the U.S. might leave NATO. The sound you just heard in the distance was Vladimir Putin summoning his photographers, ripping his shirt off and pounding his chest in delight at that prospect. I mean, on top of all that, David Ignatius now reports at the Washington Post that the big giveaway Trump appears to be planning for his one-on-one meeting with Putin in less than 2 weeks is to let Russia have Syria. Russia's big ally in the Middle East is Assad, the dictator of Syria. Syria is 7 years into a civil war. Russia's been fighting on the side of Assad, their ally, the Syrian dictator. The U.S. before now has been supporting the rebels who've been fighting against Assad. But apparently that is about to change. We are about to switch sides if David Ignatius's reporting is correct. He says at the Post, quote, the catastrophic war in Syria is nearing what could be a diplomatic endgame that will, quote, preserve power for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Quote, Trump appears ready to embrace a policy that will validate Assad, an authoritarian leader who has gassed his own people. He appears ready to abandon a Syrian opposition that was partly trained and supplied by the United States. Quote, Trump's willingness to accede to Russian power in Syria and to give up hard-won U.S. gains troubles many Pentagon officials, but they seem to be losing the argument. We don't know exactly why, ahead of this year's midterm elections, President Trump has hastily arranged this one-on-one summit that he is about to have with Vladimir Putin. We don't know why, ahead of that summit, he is rushing to tick off all of America's Western allies and rushing to tick off every foreign policy box you could conceivably imagine Russia might have in terms of a wish list from the U.S. government. But that's what he's doing. And before now, I think you could reasonably say that there was at least a little awkwardness, a little distance between the Republican Party, between other elected Republican officials and President Trump on his unnerving and unswerving desire to do what Russia wants all the time. Right? All through this weird interlude in American history where the president's ties to a foreign adversary are as yet unknown and the subject of a very serious investigation. Right? All through this time, President Trump's inexplicable closeness to Russia has really been a President Trump problem and not a Republican problem more broadly. At best, congressional Republicans were critical of the president for his stance toward Russia. At times, they were even opposing him in terms of his friendliness toward Russia. At worst, they were awkwardly ignoring his friendliness to Russia and just pretending it wasn't happening. But now, look what happened today. I mean, a congressional delegation itself is not a bad thing. Congressional delegations happen all over the world, to countries we get along with and countries we don't, to countries we are allies with and countries we have a beef with. But here's Richard Shelby and all these other run-of-the-mill Republican senators not only visiting Russia right now, in a partisan visit, no Democrats allowed, but really getting on board with Trump there, saying, you know, we don't need to be adversaries. He literally said that, we don't need to be adversaries. Senator Shelby told the head of the Russian parliament today, I'm not here today to accuse Russia of this or that or so forth. We're here striving for a better relationship. That used to be something that only Trump would say. But now that has apparently also been stuffed into the mouth of the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee and everybody else on this trip with him. What's going on here?
When my hot water heater failed.
And agree on is this: Trump is polarizing. His fans love him, his critics hate him, and the debate over Trump is dividing not only the country, but even some families. 40% say they've argued with family over Trump. 16% even stopped talking to a friend or family member over Trump. Luckily, though, that hasn't happened to my next two guests. Here's David Karawa, Sr., a Trump supporter, and his son, David Karawa, Jr., a Trump critic, and they are taking their political fight to the voters of Rhode Island, running against each other for the same state House seat. Here they are today, in fact, together at City Hall, picking up their nomination papers. And the father and son are now joining me live. Thank you so much both for being here. If I may, David Jr., if I may begin with you, why do you deserve this seat over your dad?
It's not so much necessarily that I deserve it, but I'm just excited to be a part of something new and hopefully be, you know, a new perspective in the seat.
Okay, well, let me ask you, what is your perspective that is different from your dad's perspective, or how is it different?
Well, obviously the age gap and me growing up here throughout my life and my father growing up in Guatemala, it's definitely been, you know, two different sides to things, and so I think I definitely have a different perspective than what he would have.
All right, David Sr., let me get your take on this. How do you see your perspective being different than that of your son's, and why do you deserve that seat over him?
Well, you got to remember that I'm not only running against my son, I'm also running against the current Representative Abney. He is part of the powerful committee of finance. He's actually chairman of the finance committee. And last year in February, Representative Abney let the free pass bus program end for veterans, seniors, and people with disabilities. And I think that's an outrage. And I am going to try to get the votes of District 73 in Newport and prevent from those disadvantaged to suffer under these political regime that we have had in Rhode Island for the last 80 years has been democratically controlled. But Dave, that's a major problem.
Let me ask you, though, your perspectives, because I know that you, sir, are a Trump supporter. Your son is not a Trump supporter or opposes the policies that President Trump is pursuing on a national level. What is the biggest argument that two of you have had over President Trump's policies and actions since he's been in office? David Sr., I'll let you go first this time.
Well, of course, it's going to go back to immigration. I mean, my son is first generation. Kind of first generation. I was born in the United States, but I grew up in Guatemala and then returned to the U.S. So I see immigration in a very different perspective. And I also don't think that the immigration issue, it's only an issue that has to be dealt with in the U.S.
So do you agree with President Trump? Do you agree with the zero tolerance policy that was in place and then ultimately rescinded?
Well, absolutely. I agree that we need to have our borders secured and safe. Otherwise, the holiday we're going to be celebrating tomorrow is irrelevant.
Okay.
We need
Junior,
to secure our freedom.
David Jr., I'll give you a chance to respond as well. Go ahead.
In that sense, I disagree a little bit because, you know, for the land of opportunity, I feel this place is essentially a haven for the rest of the world, where we're an example to the world. And for us to not let people come in, I think, is a tad ridiculous.
There's got to be a process, of course.
Let me ask you guys really quickly, though. One of the most important voters, if not the most important voter in this district, is obviously David Sr., your wife, your mom, David Jr.
Yeah.
Can you guys tell us which way she's leaning? Is she an undecided voter at this stage, or has she made up her mind?
I think that she's probably going to vote for my son because she's the mama, you know. I'm pretty sure she's going to vote for him. And in fact, you know, that day I'm actually going to vote for my son as well, just because he's my son. But I'm determined to win this race. I'm going to defeat my son, and I'm going to defeat Rep. Abney because it's time for real leadership. We need a balance in power at the State House. The Democrats have controlled the state. we're not going to be the ocean state anymore. We're going to be the state in the bottom of the ocean if we don't change the direction of the state that is in right now.
And Junior, what do you make of your mom expressing her vote for you? What do you think of that?
I mean, she says she might vote for me, but at the end of the day, it's her decision, and she might surprise us both by voting for the other candidate. So we really don't know.
Will you? First of all, before I let you go, David Senior, I know that you're wearing your Trump socks. Is that right? Is that a good luck sign that we have them up on the screen there?
It is my good luck garment that I always wear when I'm in interviews or when I'm in.
Junior, what do you think of those socks? You got any socks like that or no?
No, I think they're a tad silly, but if they make him feel good, then there's nothing I can say about that.
All right, we're going to have to end it there, gentlemen. Thank you both very much. David Senior, David Junior, good luck.
Happy 4th.
Good luck. Thank you, guys. Good luck to both of you. We'll be right back.